채널 젊은 달. 네, 오늘 소개해드릴 분은 시나리오 작가 에런 솔킨입니다. 이분의 대표작은 A Few Good Men, 소셜 네트워크, 머니볼, 스티브 잡스가 있고요. 이후에는 직접 연출도 하시면서 영화 몰리스 게임, 트라이얼 오브 더 시카고 7 등을 찍었습니다. 이런 영화 경력 외에도 연극 극작가로 틈틈이 집필 활동을 하고 계시고요. 텔레비전 시리즈도 작가, 크리에이터, 프로듀서로 참여하셨었는데요. 그 중에서도 백악관을 무대로 한 정치 드라마 시리즈 더 웨스트윙이 1999년에 시작해 2003년 프로젝트 하차까지 87편을 집필하며 이분이 글을 그냥 잘 쓰는 것이 아니라 긴 시간 동안 지속적으로 많이 잘 쓰는 것을 입증합니다. 수상 경력은 뭐...
So we're going to talk about character and hopefully mostly how Aaron develops character. So I'm just going to do, the first question is just walk me through, pick a character. Do you write like a short story about them? Do you write prose about them before you do dialogue? Do they come from real people? How does a character actually come about in your mind?
I don't do those things that you just mentioned. Other people do, and it's important to note that there is no one way to do it. Everybody does it differently. For me, rather than kind of tell the audience who a character is, I like to show the audience what a character wants. It all boils down to intention and obstacle. Somebody wants something standing in their way of getting it. They want the girl, they want the money, they want to get to Philadelphia. It doesn't matter, but they have to want it bad. If they can need it, that's even better. Something formidable is standing in their way, and the tactics that character uses to overcome the obstacle is going to define who the character is.
Violating individual privacy by creating the website www.facesmash.com. You're also charged with being in violation of university policy on distribution of digitized images. Before we begin with our questioning, you're allowed to make a statement. Would you like to do so?
I've already apologized in the Crimson to the ABHW, to Fuerza Latina, and to any women at Harvard who may have been insulted, as I take it that they were. As for any charges stemming from the breach of security, I believe I deserve some recognition from this board.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Which part?
You deserve recognition.
I believe I pointed out some pretty gaping holes in your system.
Excuse me, may I?
Yes.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I'm in charge of security for all computers on the Harvard network, and I can assure you of its sophistication. In fact, it was that level of sophistication that led us to you in less than 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yes, sir.
That would be impressive, except if you had known what you were looking for, you would have seen it written on my dorm room window.
The desire comes before all the other demographic qualities, or?
By desire, you mean intention?
The intention, yeah.
Absolutely. It's when you say demographic qualities, I think that what you're thinking of is characteristics. And that's a little bit more like Mr. Potato Head. Where you have the thing, and I'll give it big arms and little ears, and again, a hat, or no mustache, a mustache, that kind of thing. And that is absolutely comes last if it comes at all. What a character wants and how they go about getting it, how they go about overcoming the obstacle is what's going to define that character. The properties of people and the properties of character have almost nothing to do with each other. They really don't. I know it seems like they do because we look alike, characters and people. But people don't speak in dialogue. Their lives don't unfold in a series of scenes that form a narrative arc. The rules of drama are really very much separate from what we know, like I said, the properties of life.
Is that true of Shakespeare?
I would think especially true of Shakespeare. You know, people don't rhyme.
So talk to us, you're famous for dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
At what point does the dialogue come in?
How long does it take you to write a movie? The answer is actually a couple of years, but most of that doesn't look like what a passerby would say was writing. It looks a lot like me lying on my couch or watching ESPN. Again, I worship at the altar of intention and obstacle. I'm just loading up on what those things are. That's the drive shaft of the car. And once you've built that, then you can start to do the fun things that you like to do. For me, that's dialogue. I really enjoy dialogue because my parents took me to see plays starting from when I was very little. And oftentimes they took me to see plays that I was way too young to possibly understand. Like, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf when I was 9. And I did not understand what was happening on stage, but I loved the sound of dialogue. It sounded like music to me, and I wanted to imitate that sound. So now, story for me, plot, is a real weakness. I consider plot to be kind of a necessary intrusion on what I really want to do, which is write dialogue. But I can't write dialogue unless there's a plot. So I will kind of get myself as loaded up as I can on who wants what and what's standing in their way. For instance, with The Social Network, always start before I know how it's going to end. Really. I wish I knew how it was going to end, but I just can't wait that long. I have to get started. And I hope it comes to me along the way. So I had about the first third, and I definitely had the first scene, which it's a very simple scene. It takes place in a bar on a college campus, and two students, one of whom is Mark Zuckerberg, they're breaking up. And that's the scene. And when I finally sat down to write it, it occurred to me for the first time, and it had been about a year leading up to that, of thinking and going and visiting the final clubs at Harvard and spending a lot of time with the Winklevoss twins and that kind of thing. When I finally sat down to write that first scene, it occurred to me that these two characters were younger than any characters I had ever written before. Suddenly I had to make them sound young and like they're young today in the 21st century. And I think I maybe wrote 6 lines before I said, this is just god-awful. They're going to have to talk the same way everybody talks in everything that I ever do. And the characters I write don't really distinguish themselves by the way they talk.
Yeah. So when you write a great line, you want me on the wall, you need me on the wall, do you know right there, this is a really good line?
I know when I write a line that I like, musically, it feels right. And again, what the words sound like are as important to me as what they mean.
You've been doing this now for, I don't know, a couple decades. Do you think it's changed the way you see the world when you're in conversation with people? Are you at work? Are you more observant than you had if you'd been doing something else?
Yeah, definitely. More observant is a nice way of saying it. I am less in the actual moment than I am trying to use whatever this moment is to help myself at work. First of all, I'm always terrified that I have written every word I know. And in every order that you can put it. I have a dictionary, and I'm haunted by the fact that in that dictionary on my shelf is the best play ever written if I can just pick the right words and put them in the right order. It's already there, and I just need to crack the code. And so basically, it's hard to get me 100% present in a moment. Frequently, if I'm really stuck, I'll go out into a public place, a diner, a bus stop, any place where you might overhear a conversation, and hope that I can land in the middle of a conversation that will get me thinking, what in the world was the beginning of this conversation? And I'll try to write that. So I was in a diner once and just overheard somebody, they were really frustrated, saying, honestly, how many people can you think of named Gordon? And I thought, let me get out of here. I'm going to write the rest of this scene. I'm going to write the beginning of this scene. I was in Jackson, Mississippi, passed by a park bench. 2 men were sitting there, and one of them said, who that there going to get the jump on Jesus? And again, I thought, that's what I'm talking about. He wrote the best line of the scene. Now let me just write the rest of it.
Now, do you think you're more empathetic? You're sort of mining, but to understand intention and obstacle, you've got to actually get into the minds of people.
I'm not sure if this is what you mean by empathetic or not, but I've written 2 anti-heroes. One was Mark Zuckerberg, and the other one, let me make this sound as little like a plug as I can, is in Steve Jobs, which opens October 9th. Okay. And in those cases, when you're writing an anti-hero, you have to have empathy. You can't judge the character. Those characters I write anti-heroes or even outright antagonists, like Nicholson's character in A Few Good Men. You really want to write them like they're making their case to God why they should be allowed into heaven. I am emotional when I write. I'm actually very physical when I write too. Especially when it's going well. I start acting out the part. I stop typing and I start walking around. I once broke my nose while I was writing. I was writing an early episode of The Newsroom. Kind of got up in the middle of the night because I realized there's a great gag. It's sort of as old as comedy itself, but it will work right here. And I just went from my bedroom to keep a little office at home, just to write a note to myself to do this, and then those notes became a little longer, and then I started writing dialogue. I just the hell with it, and opened the script and started writing. And what it was a moment where Jeff Daniels, having just experienced the last straw, was lunging at a staffer, doing one of these with somebody holding him back. And I was, at the moment that I was kind of doing that, I had moved from the office into the bathroom and lunged into the mirror with nobody to stop me from doing it. If it had been a Scorsese movie, he would have said, "Let's go again, this time a little less blood." My nose was plainly broken. So I called a friend of mine. It was about midnight, and she came over and said, "Oh my God, we've got to get you to the emergency room right now." I said, "No, read these pages. Just tell me if this is funny." And then go.
What's the best moment? Is the best moment in your career, is it the moment when you write it? Is it the moment when it's on the screen or on the stage or when the actors read it? At what point is the craft fulfilled?
There are a lot of good moments along the way. Again, you're going to have way more bad days than good days. And, you remind yourself that a professional baseball player who only fails 2 out of 3 times is going to the Hall of Fame. The good moments, you've written a scene well, and you've left off at a place where you can go to bed knowing what you're doing when you get up tomorrow morning. That you're not going to get up tomorrow morning climbing the walls because you don't have an idea. That you know just what you're going to do. You've given yourself a leave. That's a great moment. Somebody else reading it, somebody with fresh eyes coming to it. I remember my first movie table read. It was A Few Good Men was my first movie. And we're having a table read. It was about 80 people on a soundstage. Nicholson had his first line. And there was just kind of an audible gasp in the room because it wasn't somebody doing a Nicholson impersonation. It was Nicholson. And there have been a number of actors that I've felt that way about. But the big deal moment is when somehow you know that you've written something, and it's not just about writing it, because remember, there's a big difference between what you and I do. You write things that are meant to be read, and I write things that are meant to be performed. So it would be like a composer just writing notes and handing out the sheet music to the audience. It wouldn't have nearly the same emotional impact. Once everybody comes together, the actors, the director, designers, technicians, and the audience, which is a major collaborator in what we're going to do tonight. If it lands, and you can tell if it does. That's a really big deal. It feels fantastic. Unfortunately, the feeling is fleeting, and you have to do it again. You cannot dine off yesterday's really good feeling. It really doesn't last that long.
Do you feel complete? Do you feel whatever ambition drove you, is it satisfied and can you rest?
I don't know a single writer who would answer yes to that question. Not a single one. My hero and my mentor coming up is a writer named William Goldman, who he has 2 Academy Awards for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men. He wrote The Princess Bride. Bill Goldman found me early and took me under his wing. He's still very much a sort of a godfather figure for me. And when I saw that he was unsatisfied and restless. Didn't feel like he'd yet accomplished what he'd always wanted to accomplish. I thought there's no hope for me.
Do you have different ambitions? Are all ambitions just dramatically interesting, or are there certain characters who've had ambitions that you thought were amazingly noble? That of the repertoire of famous characters you've done?
We just have to distinguish between the fiction and the nonfiction. The Social Network wasn't really about, we could have a discussion about the nobility of what Zuckerberg's intention was. It just wasn't really about that. On the other hand, Charlie Wilson and Charlie Wilson's War, his intentions were extremely noble. His tactics were, loony, and it worked. But when I'm writing fiction, I'm really mostly interested in the difference between not good and bad, but good and great.
You mentioned earlier that you build plot from giving your characters obstacles. They struggle and then it ends by them ultimately reaching their goal. Was there an experience in your life that influenced you to write this way, or did you adopt this writing process from your favorite writers and authors?
Let me be clear. They don't have to succeed in their goal. They can fail. But they have to have tried as hard as they can possibly try. The intention has to be clear. The obstacle has to be formidable. They can fail. You won't have a happy ending, but that's okay. Where I got that was two places. One, trying to emulate my favorite writers, but the other is Aristotle. In The Poetics by Aristotle, which is barely even a book. It's more like a pamphlet. It's like 64 pages long. Right there are the instructions for this is what drama is. This is what a play is. It also applies to movies and television. He tells you exactly what is required of a protagonist, a hero, a tragic hero, an antagonist. He tells you exactly what is required of a play. And except when it comes to bad dialogue, when you are in trouble when you're writing, it will almost always be because you have broken one of those rules of Aristotle's, and you've got to become a diagnostician. You've got to figure out what you did wrong. What rule did I break here? Are you a writer? Okay. Because my suggestion was just going to be read people that you like and try to figure out why you like them. And when you see something or read something that you don't like, try to figure out why you don't like that. Be a diagnostician.
Could I just ask something on the craft? Do you have a schedule?
Like
ESPN?
I'm like some
Like
kind of
7 to
Stephen
10,
King.
7 to
Wake
10.
up to the go to hell.